cutbacks in urban and agricultural areas. According to state scientists, the situation has been exacerbated by medical marijuana growers. NewsHour special correspondent Spencer Michaels reports on how some pot growers are using water that isn't theirs.
There shouldn't be any problems with threats. If we have a hostage situation, yell out to the officer closest to you, don't shoot me, fall to the ground, roll to cover.
It's 7 a.m. in Fortuna on California's north coast, and teams of law enforcement officers are preparing for what they call an inspection of cannabis farms deep in the wooded hills of Humboldt County.
It's a crappy road, though.
Did that road go all the way through?
No, it did not.
Despite the way it looks, these are not police officers or sheriff's deputies or federal officials. These are members of the California Water Board and of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and their aim is to protect the environment.
A special program provides funds for these game wardens, biologists, and engineers to find and inspect marijuana plantings on privately owned lands, not with an eye to eradicating them, but to see if the growers are stealing water and ruining streams with pesticide runoff.
We're really focused on these key watersheds, and this one we're going to is very important for coho salmon.
Adult marijuana plants use 5 to 10 gallons of water a day. What the scientists have found and recently published in the scientific journal PLOS ONE is that thousands of marijuana farms like this one are depleting streams at the height of the drought. Scott Bauer is a senior environmental scientist with Fish and Wildlife.
For the watersheds that we studied, 3 of 4 watersheds, we estimate marijuana cultivation can consume all of the stream flow. It's aggravating the low flow conditions of the stream. You know, you already have a stream that is suffering through a lack of rainfall or snowmelt.
This farm is owned by an absentee landlord and manned by several workers, one of whom took off when we arrived.
I think this tank's 305 gallons.
Officers found a vast and complicated array of pipes and pumps and tanks and fertilizers drawing water without permits from small creeks that run through the property.
It's deep.
They have a cistern in the creek. That cistern goes to a 5,000 gallon tank that goes to a 20,000 gallon bladder.
Wow.
And then they pump it up the hill.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Bauer and others count the cannabis plants.
It's pretty average.
Measure the size of the fields and figure out the water supply.
It requires permits, and that's our job, is to issue those permits and condition them so that, yes, you can use water, but it needs to be within reason.
Estimates are that there are 53,000 cannabis growers in California. Many, though not all, claim to be growing medical marijuana, which, with some restrictions, can be legal under state but not federal law.
A key tool for looking for marijuana growers for whatever reason in these hills has been the airplane. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife has been using aerial or satellite photography to look for those marijuana growers for quite a while.
You can see sites plain as day on Google, and then we also do aerial flights, to confirm it, that yes, there is, cultivation taking place.
What do you see from the air or from Google Earth?
Typically greenhouses, outdoor plants. It's pretty obvious what the cultivation sites are.
The sheriff of nearby Mendocino County, where the drought has lowered lakes like this, says the problem is worse on large private holdings.
There's thousands of acres in our county of land that's owned by timber companies and other large investors that is unpatrolled land, and marijuana growers trespass onto this land, and that's where they divert water from streams into the marijuana grows. Not many juries in this county will convict someone of growing marijuana, but we go after people who are illegally growing marijuana and stealing water. And our local citizens who are the jurors, they understand this.
Wine grape farmers like George Lee, attending a wine growers meeting, complain that marijuana producers sometimes actually steal their water.
They took my water. Makes me angry. There are neighbors that I have that don't have great access to water. They store water in their ponds during the winter. Some of those people do have a problem with people coming in and siphoning their water.
Lee and others are concerned that water levels in streams like the Eel River are low throughout the state and will get worse during what is expected to be a dry summer. And that is a huge concern for environmentalists like Scott Grayson, the executive director of Friends of the Eel River.
In the Eel River watershed, we have 3 runs of salmon and steelhead trout that are really in very serious trouble. They're listed as threatened on the federal endangered species list. If there isn't water in the creek here, then we lose the young coho salmon and the young steelhead trout.
In addition, Grayson says, growers often use pesticides and rat poisons, substances that get into the water supply or are ingested directly by animals.
When a bird of prey or a snake kill that rat and take it back to their nest, they're not only ingesting that poison, they're passing it on to their babies. It's something nobody ever considered was going to be an effect of pot growing in the national forests and in our wilderness areas.
But whether marijuana growers are responsible for aggravating the drought through illegal water use is disputed by some growers like Patrick Murphy, who leads California Cannabis Voice.
Right now, it's pure speculation. With the introduction of better irrigation styles and also different plant types, we'll be able to know what the actual water usage is. But I don't think that in the middle of a drought, it's a correct time to study the cumulative impacts of a cannabis industry.
What Murphy and many others want to see is cannabis legalized so that it and its water supply can be regulated. They point to an operation like Happy Days Farms, belonging to Casey O'Neill and his family, as a model. O'Neill sells his organic vegetables at farmers markets and his very healthy marijuana crop to what he calls patients.
We consume it for ourselves, and so we put the love and the energy and the time and the effort into it to produce a connoisseur product.
O'Neill gets his water from rain runoff, which he stores in ponds he has constructed on the property and in tanks.
So if we store the winter rainwater, then we're able to use it as farmers without taking water away from the fish. I fundamentally believe that all cannabis grown in California could be grown on stored rainwater with a concerted government effort to support tank programs and support rainwater catchment ponds.
Despite his good practices, O'Neill, who once was jailed for possession and cultivation, fears that without regulation, he remains vulnerable.
Because the system hasn't provided regulation, there's no way for enforcement to say who's good farmers and who's bad. And so as farmers, we live under this constant shadow of fear. You never know. The dogs bark and you think, is that the police?
People are no longer talking about whether this is legal behavior or not. They know that this industry is the fastest growing industry in the United States. We're craving regulations, and we're also craving the incentives that come with those regulations. So if you're a compliant farmer and you're doing a good job as an environmental steward, then you are rewarded with an above ground marketplace, maybe crop insurance, and stability that this region hasn't seen for a long time.
Meanwhile, wardens and scientists continue to look for evidence of water violations at what they admit is a slow pace. In 10 months, they've inspected just 70 grows and have told 20 to 30 landowners they are in violation of state environmental laws. They call that making a small dent in a big problem. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Spencer Michaels in Humboldt County, California.